taking note of the status.
I like that. Yeah, they wouldn't know because they don't follow independent journalism. They say if it's anything around here, it's years news. Whatever they apply, it's
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's why I like you guys because you guys will tell the whole truth, and that's how we're talking about. You know, let it be in or any other outlets. I want to know any other activists in the city of Detroit that talk to these, you know, some names. Okay, and then well here, let me. Urban planners and consultants, financial strangers in our chambers, twisting up everything, and we have no recourse to actions. Like we're not being heard.
Detroit, honestly, is a shame.
But we're trying our best to fight back and restore what is lost. I mean, I'm around a lot of those people that No, after talk, same thing. They'll just put the champagne, red carpet, because they want to tax money, or they I see all these people are when we sitting in sessions. I'm not having that.
So we're going to do this kind of hot potato. I'm just going to pass the mic around.
Okay.
We good? Hey, it's Jordan. I am here in Detroit, where we are talking to some people about, God, where do you even start with Detroit? So obviously, you know, I've covered the Flint water crisis very extensively, but kind of overshadowed by Flint is Detroit's been having severe water problems dating back probably for 10 to 20 years. High lead, other contaminants, and it's essentially in part because of Flint and what Flint's gone through, but also in part of corrupt politicians, been swept under the rug. So I wanted to talk to some people, not just about the water problems, but I mean, it's gentrification on steroids here in Detroit. I mean, obviously we know about San Francisco and Seattle and New York and Chicago. Detroit, gentrification is one of the biggest problems. And really what gentrification means, as you know, is forcing poor people to get the fuck out of town. That's what it means. So I'm here with three locals who are all, I'd say, on the much loved list in Detroit. I mean, hated list by power. Joanna Underwood, you're a member of the Charter Commission.
Yeah, Detroit Charter Commission.
Detroit Charter Commission, just elected last year.
No, this year.
Oh, this year.
Oh, yeah, technically last year.
And you got 65,000 votes, and we're outspent probably like 20 to 1.
No, I got 60,000. Excuse me. I got 60,000 votes. A little over 60,000 votes. Corporate interests put up $600,000 against me and three other grassroots activists, and I came in second place as far as the overall votes that was cast.
And Miko Williams, you are with Hydrate Detroit. So you've done a lot of advocacy on water issues and other things. And Advocate Ramon, you've kind of been working on a lot of these issues together. So I want to start because a lot of people honestly have no idea what's going on with the water here because local media is bad and national media is not existent. So they shut off, as far as I know, public school water fountains last year in 2018. I saw some headlines on it, but I didn't really see I didn't see it on CNN. I just saw it local headlines. I believe it was the school superintendent or something said we're taking proactive measures because in some of their testing they found high lead levels. Yes. But as far as I could tell, it's not like they're digging up the pipes to see if the pipes are busted. They're basically throwing in filters and a lot of what we've seen in Flint. Yeah. So can you kind of talk about first the water issue, not just what happened last year, but this predates the schools. This has been citywide for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been mostly working with Hydrate Detroit around the drainage fees and high water rates that we've been having high water rates ever since the bankruptcy of the city of Detroit when Great Lakes Water Authority took over. And we have mass water shutoffs. We have a situation where in the city of Detroit, if you don't pay your water bill, they can actually put a lien on your property and take your home. So we have people that actually lost their homes over a water bill. So it's very serious here. A lot of people have got sick because of the water shutoff. Also, the hepatitis. We have bad hepatitis outbreak in the city of Detroit. We have homes that have old pipes, but also the main pipes that we're paying for with our city taxes has not been updated. And we trying to figure out where the money is going. And so
the main pipes under the street,
underneath the streets, and then also the lead pipes going up to the house and stuff like that. And so we have all these situations going on. We don't have any really response from the city government as far as the director of Detroit and Water and Sewage, Gary Brown. He has totally ignored us. He's not sympathetic to the needs of the residents, and you could tell them about the kids got poisoned and mass shutoffs in the water, and he just look at us like that's just business. We have a lot of corruption in the city of Detroit overall in our city government that allows this kind of injustice to continue to happen. And Miko is the expert when it comes down to the cases that he has. He calls me in the middle of the night crying about how bad and severe this is. So I support him. We did protests together. We have, did everything in our power as activists and community organizers to try to organize the people and get the word out about the crisis here. And we have very little support. And Detroit is a big city. It's over 139 square miles. And so it's a lot of area to cover. And everything is happening so much. It's like we got a water crisis, we got a housing crisis, we got a school crisis, we got a job crisis. It's just so many different issues here, and it's all lead back to gentrification.
And you also got a corruption crisis, which I want to talk about. Yeah. So I want to ask you, because when you look at Flint, for example, that was visible because they made a switch. You know what I mean? So people getting rashes, hair loss, all that stuff. But in other places that it wasn't a switch, it's like old pipes that they don't fix, and things like that. It's a little bit more, quiet poisoning. Yes. It's subtle. But obviously, if you found high lead levels in the schools, and that's why they shut off the water fountains in the schools, obviously you're endangering the children, because children's brains are still being formed, body organs, you name it. Can you kind of talk about, has there been known problems as far as lead poisoning among kids, behavioral problems?
Well, basically there has been.
Don't kill my own.
Well, basically there has been documented problems within the city of Detroit that is not getting exposure. We don't have a health department here. The health department that we do have is contracted outside of the city of Detroit. So they basically come in and they offer these health recommendations. We have a lead department, but no testing of lead levels in children has been performed. We also have health experts that have already concluded that the school's water, along with the city water, with all of these water shutoffs, is containing hepatitis A and other deadly diseases. But the water department has basically denied those claims. They will not accept the reports. The mayor of the city of Detroit will not open an investigation as to getting testing of all the children in Detroit public schools. They were already in trouble when they first went back last year. And they were it was a whole heat wave, 90-degree heat wave, and they still went to school with bottled water, not adequate supplies to make sure that children are having access to clean quality H2O. It shouldn't come from a bottle. It should come from the tap, but let alone to make sure it's a public health and safety violation that has to be rendered. We have to make sure that certain things are in place. Joanna and I were actually at a rally in front of the school center building last year, and one of the main things that I said, that certain protocols was not in place, certain communications have not taken place. They have allowed these children to come to school, and you're not no child should be in school while the water, this is the water that they drink out of when they go to play, is being contaminated. And then you're brushing it off. Nikolai Vitti brushed it off as saying, oh, well, we're going to put these things. But Nikolai Vitti is the superintendent. I kind of give him credit for trying to handle the problem, but it should have been handled in a way to where, certain processes and protocols should have taken place.
Ask you a follow-up, because it seems to me, let's put it this way: if the Upper West Side of Manhattan they found high lead, they'd be in there probably within 2 hours. Mm-hmm. They'd probably dig up some yard, dig up the streets, because those are frankly wealthier parents and children. So how is it that they shut down the water fountains, but they're not checking the infrastructure on the ground? They're just putting new faucets and filters on?
Oh, because the Detroit Water and Sewage Department says that, you know, even though that's their responsibility, certain things they cannot engage with. So they divided a fine line. I remember Joanna going to the mayor's meeting, district community meeting, to bring up this issue. And the mayor literally disrespected the citizenry. Also, Gary Brown, the executive director of DWSD, said that he talked to Nikolai Vitti. There's certain things that he wouldn't tell us, but as I understood was, there's certain boundaries where we could get on the pipes, but the Detroit Public School Board will have to approve contracts for certain piping to be done by contractors. Now, that's a problem to me because we've been through that road before where we have had contractors get in on some of the bids and work was not performed, or it was little to no work done at all. So, you know, when you say that our own water workers that we pay for, well, we used to pay for, now they're outsourced, that they can't get on these pipes, that lets me know that, you know, you really don't care about the quality of our children.
Part of the main problem that we face is that it's misrepresentation. And that's just not just from a school board perspective, but it's also from our city council and our mayor, our administration as well. They do not represent the people. And it's based on the people having no interest in government, no interest in school board members. The voting turnout in this city is no more than 23%. So you got 77%, that's mean hundreds of thousands of people that has no interest in local politics. So if they not have no interest in local politics, they turning their back on the school system, they turning their back on gentrification, poverty, and all services that's supposed to be rendered to us. And that's the problem. And the administration, they know that. They know the people done turned their back on it based on lack of faith and ignorance. So they doing anything they want to the people as a result of that.
If I can just say that, you know, even take it like going back to protocol and processes, it shouldn't take a citizens community group to do water testing around the neighborhoods where the schools are tainted. This happened back in 2015. It was with one school called Spain Elementary School. That was the school that got the Ellen $500,000. And then they got a check from Ellen DeGeneres for $500,000. That school, in the next few weeks after that check, it was determined that, you know, they were in horrible situations, but that their water was contaminated. And then it was 30 something schools that also had found to have contaminated water. The superintendent said, then I'll get on this, I'll take care of it. And we have not heard anything until last year when it was said that over 50 schools now, barely, we don't have that many schools. We used to have 270 something schools, now down to 100 and to the low hundreds. So if that's half of the Detroit public schools that has contaminated water, don't you think you want to bring in health officials and people? Now, he tried to tap Dr. Mona Atisha, the doctor in Flint that discovered the lead. He tried to get her to hold this work group among stakeholders and experts. I fought to be on that board. And within 3 weeks of its creation, Nikolai Vitti scrapped the board and said, well, we got these recommendations. We're just going to follow them. And the school's water issue should be taken care of. But as I checked, you know, as of recently, and you'll talk to Elena Geralda, she's the school board member in exile. She will tell you that they literally took those recommendations and they have not done anything with it because we haven't heard updates from the school board meeting since Nikolai Vitti made that.
I just want to ask a follow-up. So are the water fountains still shut down, or they reopened the water fountain?
Still shut
Okay,
down.
got it.
Yeah, and going back to what Miko said about me going to address this to the mayor at the mayor meeting, I was escorted out by like 20 officers. So the heavy police presence that he has at his community meetings discouraged the residents from coming out to participate. But it was a lot of angry parents there, and there was a lot of children there expressing their concerns about the safety of the water. And once again, it was not a welcoming. You know, you would think somebody who's the mayor of the city of Detroit will own and take responsibility. He put off blame to everybody else. And at the end of the day, these are your children because you are the mayor over the city. And he has never, ever talked in a way where he actually concerned about these children and the parents of these children. And that's why it boils down to the parents and the school board putting pressure on the school board to actually produce some results, because at the end of the day, we do got an elected school board. You know, we do got an elected school board, and the school board has done very little to protect those children in DPS, and they get tons of money because the city of Detroit, it has a 50%, over a 50% poverty rate. It's a
One of the highest in the country.
highest in the country. We are a entitlement city because we have such a high concentration of poverty, and the Detroit Public School is a Title I, so they get all kinds of funding, you know. And so the question is, where is this money where is this money going to? The state didn't have control over our school system, and they have mismanaged hundreds of millions of dollars. We haven't got an explanation on where the school money have went to. Also, we have the lottery that's supposed to go to fund all the Michigan schools. When it comes to the city of Detroit, it's short change. We, like Miko said, we had hundreds of schools that got shut down for no reason at all. And outside of they saying, well, it's low population. Well, people will continue to move out of the city of Detroit because there is no services here. We have the highest car insurance in the country. We have now one of the highest rents, you know, because of the gentrification. We paying the cost of living in the city of Detroit is at $50,000, but the average person in the city of Detroit make $27,000. Most of them making under $12,000 a year. So this issue about water is a growing crisis in the Midwest, if you ask me. But and this is battleground in Michigan. Yeah, it's the battleground in Michigan. We once had. Michigan has the Great Lakes. Our water and sewage system department is worth what, $80 billion plus the. $800 billion. $800 billion system that was funded by the taxpayers, okay, that covers the city of Detroit and 127 suburban communities, okay. This is a profitable water department that was stripped from the city of Detroit with a bankruptcy that was totally contrived by the last Governor Snyder. And 5 years later, we're seeing the total impact and effect of all these, you know, authorities and all these people, financial management, and how it totally affected us in our community. And the result is death. You know, it's a slow death, but it surely is a death.
I just want to make a point to you guys and the audience, so you know, I'm not being rude. I'm kind of my own social media, so I'm sharing the interview while we're live. So I didn't want you to think I'm like not paying attention.
It's okay.
Yeah. So just making sure you know, audience, I'm paying attention, but I'm trying to get bigger people on social media to press the share button. So I wanted to ask you because, you know, like people heard emergency manager for the first time when it comes to Flint. But there was an emergency manager put in Detroit. Yes. And frankly, if you want to talk about threats to democracy, Russia comes last. Yes. This comes first. Because what an emergency manager is essentially just an extension of the governor. It's just an unelected person that takes over power for those who are elected. You could say that the people you elected are shitty too, but they're not making decisions in Flint, and they weren't here. Can you kind of talk about, and by the way, it was a Democratic governor. Democratic governor, Jennifer Granholm, inserted an emergency manager into here. So I want to ask you, A, is there still an emergency manager? And B, what power does the elected government have under these emergency manager laws?
Well, I will speak as far as being a commissioner of the Detroit Charter Commission. I could tell you our local municipality been totally destroyed by the financial management. Government departments that we used to have no longer have. We have been infiltrated with over 15 different authorities, which is these basically, well, how you call it, a smaller version of government. We have a land bank authority, a quasi government that's controlling our land, that's controlling our water, that's controlling even the light fishers. Everything. I mean, we have a land bank authority. We got a building authority. We got a lighting authority. We got this TIF, which is stand for Tax Increment Finance, where they're taking all the money that's generated in our downtown area, and they keep it there. They keep it there to do private development with public funding, with public money that is supposed to go to our city services. So we have been totally taken over by big business and corporations that has pretty much just demolished any kind of democracy. We have no democracy. We have no accountability, no responsibility for our elected officials, and they claim they have power, but every time we challenge them on something, the state. We have the Financial Review Board that is supposed to be doormat, but I was told that if the city of Detroit get a certain amount of waivers, so the state says that they do these annual reports to the state, and if they get 10 waivers, then they come back and take over the city of Detroit government again. We have retirees that lost their whole entire pensions. I'm talking about people who had, maybe 100,000 losing 50 to 60,000. Some people lost all their pension in the bankruptcy, and 60% the bankruptcy was financed. The debt was paid by retirees, even though the state of Michigan protected their pensions under the state constitution. So when we talk about Detroit, a city that used to be a blue-collar city where the middle class, the birth of the middle class, the unions, all of that, we're talking about a city that used to have so much, so-called middle-class America to be nothing more right now than a shadow of what it used to be. And we're fighting on the ground to fight for whatever left is in the city, because everything been outsourced and privatized out.
I want to ask you, because you were talking about kind of like citizen, whatever you would call it, lack of ignorance or lack of information. But what she's describing is essentially the Gestapo. I mean, you're just layering one layer of, frankly, it doesn't even sound legal. You're layering a legal bureaucracy over a legal bureaucracy over a legal bureaucracy, and it kind of sounds like they're doing it to basically just make the people move out or become hopeless. I'm not defending citizen inaction, but you were saying part of it is the citizens. So many people don't vote. Is it because they feel like they're being stomped and hopeless?
Our people, going back, I'm talking about particularly black people, the lack of local voting empowerment has been an issue, and that's going all the way back since slavery, since the Reconstruction. We have always had only national representation, because black codes was state and local clamps on black people, and that went on for hundreds of years. Every act, every voting rights act, all came from the national government. So we never was able to comprehend the fact that we runs 1,000 municipalities that the demographics is all black, and we never ever capitalize off that voting power and that municipal power where we can elect officials that directly affects our life. And that's that point is being missed in the black community. I wanted to touch on something y'all said about the school system and the emergency manager, because when Granholm did put the emergency, they also did something to the school system where they tricked the voters to enact to enhance security in the schools. And when the voters thought that they was enhancing security, they took millions of dollars out the fund, and they took an old tore down school and turned it into a police force for the Detroit Public School Police Department, with their own chief of police, their own assistant chief, their own inspectors, their own K-9 unit, and this all funded from $10.3 million out the general fund of the school. This going on every year. When you got a failing school system, that precinct look better than most of the schools that they built. I'm talking about it don't got no water problems. It don't got no structure problems. It's state of the art. And this is a precinct straight up funded. So this is the mentality of our elected officials and what they think about people. A place to incarcerate them is more important than a place to school them and to educate them. And that was enacted under the emergency manager as well. But that's the major problem, that we don't have the connection with local voting in our community. Once we can grasp that, we can be better off as a people.
I just wanted to say, first of all, I was around the emergency manager takeover back in 2011. We, the voters, this was put up to a vote, and 53% of Michiganders voted against emergency management because they saw it was a takeover of their communities, charter municipalities, or village township. Michigan is made of these municipalities, certain villages where there is a certain way of it's violation of the Home Rules City Act. It's also violation of city charters across the state of Michigan. We voted no on those grounds, and the Governor Rick Snyder, went back and pulled the legislator to come back to the table, revise Public Act 4, that is now 436, that is appropriated with a budget, and it cannot be repealed by the citizens of Michigan. Well, when that law took place, while we were unwrapping our presents at Christmas 2012, April 4th, 2013 was when Kevin Orr got here to the city of Detroit as our emergency manager. That man was disrespectful. He was not courteous to the citizens. His first meeting was full of people, and he threatens the community saying, oh, he's supposed to know our history. He'll cut our throats and leave us bloody in the middle of the street with the best of them. That was a clear threat. And then when he went to butcher the unions, he went to butcher the pensions, he's also outsourcing, he's selling things. He threatened to sell our art museum that attracts the biggest attractions in this country, the Detroit Institute of Arts. He cut the pensioners, got an offer of $195 million to give to the pensioners for them to split. He also gave away our biggest assets to corporate philanderers and folks that should be in jail. Belle Isle is our biggest resource. He stole that, put it in a contract, and then packaged it up to where the legislature voted on for 30 years. It was originally for 10. They wanted 99 years. We said no. The water department, our biggest asset, we got that back from Kevin Orr after the shutoffs had happened. Now, 2 days before he announced the mass shutoffs that would devastate this city, he announced privatization bids for privatization that enticed Veolia Water to submit their proposals, and they are the ones that now have the contract.
For you paying attention at home, Veolia Water was one of those involved with the Flint water crisis.
Yes, they were. And they're the main one that's here. They did a plan of adjustment back in 2013 to send recommendations of if the Detroit water and sewerage system goes private, it will be ran under this model. That model has not worked. It has not worked in also places around the world. The biggest takeaway from this is that an emergency manager is almost akin to a man coming into your home, having sex with your partner or your wife or whomever, and then forcing you to watch, taking over your finances, telling you to go make him something to eat. And you sitting here now, defenders of democracy are not going to let an outsider come into their city to take over what God knows what without the citizens' input and approval. Now, this is what happened to Detroit. They feel the state of Michigan officials, and though it was federally arbitrated, this bankruptcy that happened in 2014, June 2014, we were bankrupt, and it was made headline news all across the world. the Motown Sound, the place that put the world on wheels, the arsenal of democracy, is now bankrupt. We have no money. And the memorandum of understanding was to say in the bankruptcy court, this is what goes on with all of our assets, our water. We have been leased by the suburbs to the tune of $50 million for our water system when it's $800 billion to operate and maintain. We just got a report in that says that the Great Lakes Regional Water Authority was illegally propped up, and it was also projected to make the bill pass. So while the bankers got bailed out, we got sold out. That's basically what it is. Emergency management for whom? It's not for the citizens, because this isn't our fault. It's now our fight because it's not anything that we would have done. We have elected officials in power that are spineless, that do not stand up for the will of the people. When Joanna and I come down to these city council meetings, and Ramon, they want to look at us as if we crazy, if we're disruptors because we ask certain questions, because we highlighted certain things that we need clarification. Then they go in the back rooms and talk about whatever it is and come back and say we made a decision.
I just wanted this. I just wanted to just talk about a little bit about the history of the city of Detroit. This is a predominantly black city, just like Flint. We had a 1967 we call it rebellion, but other people would call it a race riot. Okay, what happened is that a lot of Caucasian people move out of the city. And so it's always been this thing that we're going to take Detroit back from the black people. And we had a mayor by the name of Contamination Young who was very adamant about keeping Detroit predominantly black because of the racist suburbs, pretty much. Brooke Patterson and Brooke Patterson, they made it very clear if we go across 8 Mile, this street called 8 Mile, that we'll be harassed, even killed. So it was really bad, and as a little girl, we was always taught, don't go across 8 Mile, or you're going to get harassed. So I think that after Contamination Young died, I think he put stuff in place. And then we had another mayor who basically wanted to, we call sell out to the white folks, and created policies that didn't benefit the city of Detroit resident at all, but benefited the suburbs, to the point where all our jobs was basically given out to the suburbs. And even to this day, 70% of the jobs downtown. Now, matter of fact, 90% of the jobs downtown. 90% of the jobs downtown is not held by Detroit. It's not Detroit residents. All of them is outside of the city of Detroit. And 70% of everybody living in the city got to drive miles away just to make $10 an hour. So this was a strategic plan to not only reduce the population of the city of Detroit because it was predominantly black, but to make sure we would never regain any real power or have the control over the so-called resources of the city of Detroit. And we had particularly our own elected official, which predominantly was black, that helped orchestrate this, and so when you think about the city of Detroit, I just want people to understand that a lot of the situations that happened to the city of Detroit, it was out of our hand. It was, a lot of that stuff was on the state of Michigan has targeted every predominantly black city in the whole entire state, from Detroit to Flint to Benton Harbor, Pontiac, Highland Park, you name it, all had financial managers. But the cooperation from our own elected people who are predominantly black assisted in destroying their own culture and people. And so I just want people to understand that we are resilient people. We've been fighting on the ground, but we also can stop this gentrification process in the city of Detroit, and we can have a redevelopment of the city and without displacement.
I have one more thing.
Can I just mention something? So I just want to bring up, to connect it to General Motors too. So one of the plants they're closing, General Motors is laying off nearly 15,000 workers in North America after getting $8.1 billion in profit last year, after getting $55 billion in bailout, after getting $514 million from Trump's tax cut. So they're closing down the Detroit, I keep mispronouncing it, Hamtramck?
Detroit Hamtramck
Detroit Hamtramck plant. But you'll know more about it than me. But the Detroit Hamtramck plant was built by using eminent domain to decimate a whole community of Poletown. You guys would know better than me. So between eminent domain and now on top of these problems, they're laying off these workers, which frankly, I'm sure a lot of the workers don't even live in Detroit. No. So it's all connected. The corporations hijacking the national government. It has a trickle-down effect to the state. You wanted to add something?
Yes, I wanted exactly. You know, the problem with the GM is that the city of Detroit still has eminent domain over that land, and God knows what they can pull. And that's why we're saying we want the GM plant to stay. We want those workers to be given, a reprieve. First of all, GM should not be cutting any jobs that they've just gotten any money. Don't run that game to me that we don't have no money and we're cutting off workers at the blue collar level. The car companies here have already been compromised. The dream of working in a factory and having the piece of the American dream is no longer. They're even cutting wages at 14 to 30 something an hour working on the plants. So we don't have any benefits. And the workers there are struggling. They're struggling. They cashed in their 401ks. They have literally nothing left to show for it. And you're going to cut their jobs, send them overseas. What are we going to do with that will kill the economy of Detroit. We won't have any tax base because people will have to move out to find other jobs and other opportunities, and then opens the right door to gentrification because they will take that land, try to come up with some name or some hipster type. It just makes no sense to act so rash as to cut jobs without creating a succession plan to get those workers into other jobs within GM.
I wanted to say something. I want to touch on gentrification here in Detroit. The major component when we're talking about what's happening in Detroit is that they're using our resources in order to do what they're doing. And I'm going to give you an example. Most of the federal money that's coming in to help with housing, Section 8, they're taking it, mixing it with private developers, shutting down public subsidized housing, and then they mixing them. I'm going to give you an example. When they closed a housing project, when they opened it, it was 2,100 units. When they got down to displacing those people, it was only 200 low-income units, and the rest of the units became mixed income. So they use HUD funding, which the basis of that funding is poverty. That's the same with everything they did on how they carved up Detroit over the last 5 years. They took federal funds coming in from the hardest hit funds, and they took them, they drawed up areas that they wanted to gentrify first. And they target those areas for what they call blight removal, which they hid under demolition. Okay, and they tore down partials in those areas with no intentions on building in those areas. So they carved them up and they used the funds. Those funds was meant to help our people that was failing with their mortgages. Then none of the city council members fight on behalf to help nobody with their failing mortgage. They went further, the city council. They enacted afterwards, they enacted a law to give themselves half off the property that the people had lost here, and gave their family members half off the property. They immediate family gave all contract half off the property that was taken from people under nuisance abatement, which is the same thing as eminent domain, which is what they've been using here. And not only that, under all the federal funds. So the major component is they using the things that was meant to help us in order to hurt us.
I want to talk about, because I did a lot of work around the housing crisis in the city of Detroit. We lost over 100,000 homes in the city of Detroit. And I believe 2011, the old the old Treasury before Eric Chabris foreclosed on 100,000 people's homes in 1 year, making us the first American city that ever foreclosed on that many homes at one time. And what's so sad about it is that 70% of those homeowners was actually qualified to get their taxes exempt because they was too poor to pay for them. And now ACLU has sued the city of Detroit and won a lawsuit based upon the fact that they intentionally foreclosed on these people's homes. And when President Barack Obama sent the federal fund, which is the hardest hit fund, the city of Detroit was sent hundreds of millions of dollars to assist in this crisis. And our own governor, Snyder, and our mayor, Mike Duggan, intentionally went to the United States government, to the Department of Treasury, and asked, can they divert that money to remove blight in our community? And then our mayor had given all the contracts to demolish these properties to predominantly white construction companies, to the tune where I can show you these big, huge demolition holes in the city of Detroit. That's all in the city of Detroit. That basically we got over 700 of these holes in the city of Detroit that I've been trying to get filled in the city for months now, and that is totally dangerous to our community and our public and everything. And I gotta find it, but I could just show you all these demolition holes that we have in the city of Detroit. And this fraud, this plain out corruption, this is totally illegal. But this happens when you don't have citizens that is willing to vote these people out. And they have this fear tactic that they do with our residents. They give us a little crumbs to the elderly people. We call it the chicken dinners. You know, they'll go to the nursing homes and they give out little chicken dinners, and then, oh, vote for me, oh, vote for me. And since only we got 400,000 registered voters and only 20% of them actually vote, so they able to win whole elections in districts that got 100,000 people with 10,000 votes. You know, small percentage of voters that's voting. And so one of our major goals, outside of me being the Detroit Charter Commission, is that I'm actually rewriting the City of Detroit Charter, which is our local constitution, so we can lay the framework in a way what is actually benefiting the residents of the City of Detroit. But on top of that, actually creating a campaign to increase the amount of people to vote between the ages of 18 and 35 and an election that we about to have in 2021.
I know you're going to call me a Debbie Downer, but like I have cynicism in my blood. So let me ask you a question about that. So if the federal government don't give a shit about the Constitution, they don't. I mean, we're in like 8 illegal wars and blah, blah, blah. Not to diminish your work, but I'm just asking you what safeguards as part of that Constitution. Is it a new Constitution, or is it more structural reform in total?
Yeah, it's more the city of Detroit, like Miko said, we got the state of Michigan has the Home Rules Act that allow townships and local municipalities to basically self-govern themselves, okay, and set their own rules on what they like, the mayor and the city council, basically their whole government, what they would like to see and what they legally like to be put in place throughout the city or the township. And so our city charter, and the current one, was never really used because we was under financial manager. And that's another thing. Under financial manager, they could suspend the charter just like they did in Flint, and just like Miko said, they did in Detroit. And so now, 5 years after the bankruptcy, this is our first opportunity to write a charter that include all these authorities that has been basically our local assets and public property has been outsourced out. So basically they in this city without no oversight, providing public services to residents using taxpayer money, like the land bank. The land bank is so out of control. They hoard houses for developers, okay? And then they have a nuisance abatement policy where if you buy a house from the land bank, okay, which is a foreclosure home from some poor resident that probably lost their house for, I'm talking about like $800 or $900. Okay. And guess what they would do? They would tell you, oh, you got to fix up this property in 6 months. And they would make you sign a contract stating that you got to fix up that house in 6 months. And you got to do 30 to 40, maybe $50,000 worth of repairs to even get the house up and repaired. But they get to keep their homes that they so-called manage for years in the land bank, and these houses is not being fixed up. Is a rat infested. You have to live next to this abandoned house for years, and now they even petition our own city council to give them money from our general fund to fix up technically property that they own. Okay, while they sit there and tell the residents, you fix up your house in 6 months, and I get to use your tax money and hoard these houses for developers for years to come, creating more blight and creating our more dangerous to the residents, because the rodents, also the people being found dead in these abandoned houses, all kinds of things.
I want to bring in Ty, but I also want to point out that it's all connected, because Flint has the land bank too. So that's why I call it the controlled demolition of the middle class. Forget the middle class, just the controlled demolition of living, breathing, working people. Because in Flint, the land bank, who, by the way, you know who created the land bank? Congressman Dan Kildee, who represents Flint, and frankly, keeping it real, been frankly a little chicken shit when it comes to GM, but also the Flint water crisis, but that's a story for another day. So land bank is basically, in my view, and residents I've spoken with, basically trying to buy up as much property in the neighborhoods that they want to bulldoze, in the neighborhoods they want to bulldoze, so that they could put in a new farmer's market, so they could put...
They got basically eminent domain over all this land. These are properties that have been distressed, that have been abandoned. They were almost on a demolition list. They're given an inspection. Are they savable? Are they rehabable? They're also put into a database. And with the land bank, you barely have any right of home ownership. This is not home ownership. This is control. I know an activist that has been forthright in busting the land bank every chance she get. Now, she's ran off as seen as, maybe a crazy as such. But when you hear her and you give her an opportunity to run down the information, you'll be like, oh, my God, these people are literally cheating. This is monopoly, but a corrupt version of monopoly at hand. The water ties into that as well, because like Joanna said, you lose your home from a lien. You can also lose your home from not being able to pay the water bill at all, because you have to move out. Because if you're renting and your name is on the water bill that you're renting from a landlord or a scumlord, by that, you're responsible for those charges, and then that water bill follows you. So that makes it hard for you to get in your new place or to move into a brand new dwelling, because the water bill that you were supposed to turn on in the new dwelling, now you have to pay that old bill off in order to turn it back on. So it ties into a lot. If it's not foreclosures, water, schools, or however, we basically have, and to the citizens that have elected, we don't have a turnout. We don't have a high voter turnout. This last election was a turnout that was like 20%, but had it would have been a presidential election, had it would have been like where you pick your president, your Congress people, your state legislator, your city council men's, and all these other municipalities positions, there was no clean sweep. And barely the elected officials that were speaking, they haven't even spoke to water shutoffs, to housing foreclosures and such. And they got back in there by certain parts of the establishment, the churches, the business community, those who feel that, we're all probably wrong and we shouldn't be here. They're voted by those people, and folks that'll be fooled by chicken dinners and licking the boots of those that were paid to say, oh, well, they did a good job on my house. Oh, they took care of my water bill, and I don't have no property taxes. So what are you talking about, Miko? I mean, I'm not struggling like other people are. I think other people should do their fair share. And yet we don't have no jobs, no opportunities, or anything to show for it. But you drive around downtown Detroit and Midtown, and you'll think Detroit has just struck up a gold mine here.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
To touch further on, we do have a resolution to deal with what's going on. It's not no great big conspiracy that's going on here. Our elected officials currently right now are voted in by the people by either us voting in or us not voting. It's no municipality that you would go to in this country that you will have a mayor that has been under 4 federal investigations. You will have a city council member that's currently sitting on staff right now that's under a federal indictment and under 3 federal probes. So that lets you know that the people would not stand up, and that is the reason, because no people would allow those individuals to continue to be under federal investigations, federal probes from the same thing going on years. Cronyism, bid rigging, and bribery. The same thing for years, and no people would stand up against them. So that's the problem right there. Again, back to it. If the people come out and vote, 2017, 250,000 people voted for Hillary Rodham Clinton in 2016. 2017, the very next year in Detroit, only 60,000 people went out and voted for the mayor. In some districts, 7,000 people, they went in with 7,000 people when it's 107,000 people. So that's how many people that's not involved. And that is the problem right there. They don't even understand. They'll complain about the police, but they don't know that the police is controlled by the mayor. They'll complain about waste. They don't know that the mayor controls the waste. They don't know these things. They don't know that when they complain about the water, the mayor appoints Gary Brown. He appoints the water department. The DDA, the Detroit Land Bank, is all appointed by the mayor and the city council. So if you got a problem with them, you got a problem with your mayor, because the appointee is not going to act on behalf of himself. He's going to act on behalf of the person who appointed him. That's our problem in Detroit. And it's a resolution. 77% of the people that's not involved have to understand why it's important that they get involved in local voting.
I just want to say a disclaimer, and I just want to throw it out there as a lifelong resident of the city of Detroit. You know, when we talk about race and we talk about issues of this nature, we're not being in a way, we're calling it how it is. This town, this whole state is a racially segregated state. We worse than Virginia, okay? We ain't got nothing to compare to Virginia is nothing to what compared to us. I mean, we are a 80% majority black city. The suburbs and the outlining area, that 1 million people we spoke about earlier, those are the ones that are living in the suburbs of Oakland County, Macomb County, and other areas surrounding that. Detroit residents are we're just down to earth people. You know, we want a quality of life. We want good schools. We want better services. We deserve that. We're taxpayers, and we're being treated like second-class citizens here. And then when we speak about issues of race, people get mad and say, oh, well, why are you saying white and black? And so, because it is what it is. You have a group of people that don't look like us, that are making decisions and are not including the very same people that it is affecting. They can go home at night in Farmington, Bloomfield Hills, any suburban area, but we have to deal with the after effects. Policy drives the conditions of what we're dealing with right now. And for those people that say we shouldn't mention race, we're being racist and all. No, this is a reality. This is a true fact of life. And until you understand, because like Jordan said, this would never happen in any other affluent community. Flint would have not happened in any affluent white suburban community. It would be holy hell to pay. Why is it acceptable for black people? Why is it acceptable for poor people, for a class of people to accept being denied basic human rights. We don't have a right to education. We don't have a right to water. We don't have a right to housing. We don't have a right to anything here. And then when we're protesting, we're marching, we're rallying, we're at the table, we're developing solutions. All three of us have came to each one of those elected officials, including the mayor, with a solution, and they would not listen. They don't recognize us. I guess we have to wave some money around here for the people for us to, even then it would be a problem, because we want a fair advantage, and the fair advantage is better schools, better clean water at a price we all can pay. We share this resource, quality schools that our children can become stars and champions. We believe in education here in the city of Detroit, and we have produced stars and champions and underdogs who have competed among the world. We put, like I said again, when we talk about race, we're talking about structural racism, established racism that is already ingrained from a thought of, I'm superior, I'm better than you, you don't deserve it, but I do. And then we come to find out it's the friends and family plan. They put you up here as a puppet to push this agenda, and you only got paid a certain measly thousands of dollars, and you didn't care about the residents of the community in the first place. When you look at the Educational Achievement Authority and all these other entities, they are not subjectable to citizen to the citizens. So yes, when we do go downtown, the people get stuck. Well, yes, we do go downtown and we complain, and we have nobody to talk to, because the people that we did try to talk to have brushed us off. There is no ombudsman that we can go to him, and even then we have nobody that we. So either it be the state, the UN, the World Council in Geneva. I don't know where will we have to go, but we're gonna have.
Get me started on the United Nations. Yeah. UN corruption. So I got to ask you a question, and I mentioned it to you earlier, but this is a subject I'm passionate about. Where in God's fucking name is the local media on this? If you're an actual journalist, like most people get involved in journalism because you get you get a little exhilaration for like chasing the bad guys and holding powerful to account. I mean, Detroit is a gold mine. It is. You could literally break story after story and retire in some villa by 35. Serious.
Every journalist that came out of Detroit that tried to really report got misplaced. Every one of them. So I said every journalist that really was trying to report on our behalf out of Detroit, they end up being misplaced. So that's what we have no faith, or I don't even expect nothing. We doing a recall on the city officials that's indicted for bribery right now, and no news media has covered us. Not one of them. I'm talking about the Free Press wrote an article, the news wrote an article, but I'm talking about the straight up stations, the story station. Not one of them covered anything. So that's where the media at. The media is sold out. We have to depend on our own self, and the people that we have to talk to is the citizens. We have to wake the citizens up to understand what's going on so that they can know who is involved and who is responsible. They don't know. They know something is wrong. They just don't know who's responsible for it. And that's where we come in at to teach them who's responsible and to teach them what we can do to collectively in order to seek some resolve.
I just want to talk about classism. In Detroit, we have a classism issue as well as a racism issue. But classism, I think, in Detroit should be highlighted a little bit more, because yes, we have systemic racism as far as the state is concerned, but the city of Detroit, like we said, is predominantly black, and we have a strong classism mentality amongst the African American community. Like when you go past Puritan, it's like they get the best of the best, and that's what happens. Like they distribute the wealth in this city and those concentrated areas of where is the upper class blacks, the educated class blacks, and other poor blacks that make up majority of the city. They get ignored, and they suffer the most. I mean, we talking about extreme poverty here. We're talking about people who have a family of 4 living off of $12,000 a year.
You were just talking about earlier all these people dying during the polar vortex.
Yeah. We had reports. See, in Detroit, we have a homeless population. When I was canvassing in my research, I estimated it's approximately over 5 to 10,000 people just squatting in homes. The land bank homes they have over 100,000 parcels of 100,000 houses in their land bank. A lot of those people who got foreclosed on, they had nowhere to go. So they just squatting in the houses and stuff like that. And they can't get utility zones. But make a long story short, we got reports that it was people that froze to death in the houses. Okay. And because they live in their homes with no heat, no gas, so they just, thugging it out, And so we have a serious housing crisis, and what's so sad is that Detroit, in the African American community here, we was number 1 in the country for home ownership. Number 1, less than 10 years ago. So when we talk about the rapid beast of gentrification that just came through like a tsunami and just snatched all our homes, all our resources that we had. And then when that bankruptcy did, when they took all our grandparents and our elderly people pension, that forced them right into poverty. They worked their whole life in those plants, and they thought they was going to have that nice pension, not the plants, the city. They worked like 20, 30 years into the city, and the plants did it too. And when they thought that they was going to retire and live well, or at least live comfortably, that dream was taken away from them, And so now we got an excessive amount of our elderly people who's well over in their 70s with no money, homeless, and don't have any food to eat, And so it's just so many issues. And like you said earlier, the media, this is a gold mine for the press. I told myself I want to write a book about it. I just can't believe that this is America, and I can't believe this amount of corruption going on. And that's why I feel that for them to contain it the way they containing it gotta be from the higher levels of government. It gotta be. It's beyond just the state of Michigan government. I think somebody on a federal level say, look, you can do whatever you want to do in Detroit, and nobody will do nothing. Nobody will say nothing. It's been several federal investigations with our mayor, city council. They stay investigating, but when they reports come back, oh, we didn't find anything illegal. How? When we find it every single day? How can you justify not one minority contractor working in the city of Detroit? We got one black contractor in the whole entire city of Detroit doing demolition of homes. In the city, 85% black. You got one contractor in a whole entire city, and how is that legal? How is it legal to shut down over 100 schools with a literacy rate at 47%? How is that legal? How is it legal for them to shut off masses of people water and for water bills that's only $50, $60, $100 when we got big corporation businesses owning hundreds of thousands of dollars and nobody says nothing about it? How is that legal when we got stadiums that we spend our tax money for, but we don't even have schools for our children, and they take money from our school funds? And not only that, our housing and our city services right now, our garbage workers was laid off. That was outsourced. How is this stuff legal? How is it legal? And every time we say something, we are the rebels. We are the troublemaker. I get so much hate for just speaking the truth and to this power. It's ridiculous. Like, you get venom. You a villain all because you telling the truth. Me and Miko, man, we've been drugged down, beat down. Me and Mr. Ramon, we've been put through the ringer, and none of us get doing this for paid for nothing like this. We don't have no ulterior motives, but it's just the suffering is so bad here, and it's so much in our face. We have no choice but to react. That's like somebody put a gun to your head. You got no choice but to react, and that's how it is. It's like they got this weapon of gentrification to our head, and we got no choice but to react to it.
I just want to say. Oh my God, it's so true. Joanna and I, we've definitely been vilified, and her and I, we work regular jobs.
I'm ready to run your
Everybody says that, but you know what? Let me just speak to the media angle. They want to prop you up on a donkey And then when things go wrong, then they want to crucify you on the cross. The biggest investigation the media has done, and it was in the most spiteful, horriblest way I've ever seen media actually done, is the crucifixion of Kwame Kilpatrick. Oh my God. I mean, it was a story, but the way that he went down, and it was just unacceptable from media. So basically, Kwame Kilpatrick was our former mayor. As soon as he was elected mayor in 2002, inquiries just start coming in from, this money that was being spent, all of these deals that were coming in and such of that nature. And Kwame Kilpatrick was only accused of bid rigging, but it was actually sleeping with his mistress. That's the secretary. Okay, so that's what he really went to jail for. But then they said that he was bid rigging, engaged in corruption, and RICO charges. That was the biggest investigation the media has ever done. Since that time, we have not had a thorough, in-depth investigation over city government or anything concerning these people, the shady people, and those that are mentioned in some of these deals and situations. The only media that we have to pay attention to is Charlie LaDuff, and he was in Deadline Detroit. He used to be on the local media here. I believe something happened, and we know what happened, because when you start telling the truth and exposing everybody, then that's when you get rankled. Steve Neveling from Motor City Muckraker now work for the Metro Times. The Metro Times is another journalist publication that we look into for news. We also have citizen journalists like yourself, the late Cliff Russell and Angelo Henderson, two radio titans that were informing the community and even give them a chance to come and respond. Okay, we haven't had one word or any story. So when the media, we're the most polarized market in the nation. So you can play race optics, you can play classism and such. The water situation, how that PR was uncovered was that they contrived the story that poor people was not paying their bills simply because they poor people believe that water is free and such, and we were spending money on cable TV and big screen TVs and such. And I've investigated every person in the city of Detroit that have called needing water help. That is not the case. That is not the case. Joanne and I have been on the front, been at some citizen homes. So the media will paint a picture, a very grim picture, and our local media goes across the state. It's even transferred to different outlets across the country. There's one side, that's their side. Our side is never, like, we broke the media lockout in 2014. Because we wanted our stories to be heard. That's how they were able to cover the water crisis. That's how they were able to cover different situations here, because activists and citizens stepped up to speak when we were being vilified and we didn't want to speak to the media at all. We had people fly in here to do stories and such, and they never go anywhere because people can't understand the main part of that. When you're being taken over, you literally have no recourse to action. It's more than just pay your effing water bill. It's more than that. When the corporations are paying their water bills, when these real estate barons getting away with bundles of property that they're not keeping up, no, that is the citizen media and exposing the truth and the real. Like, what we do is not being, it's being promoted now, but there was no outlet here in the city of Detroit.
I want to ask you guys a question. I'm saying this as a white guy, so I know what I know. I don't know what I don't know. But it seems to me, you saw all these people from the South, black people from the South, come up to Detroit. The American dream, like you were talking about, they start working at the factories, all that. Then you start seeing white flight as a result of that. So white people going out to the suburbs, this and that. So it kind of seems to me like a reverse osmosis here, where they're just trying to push those black people that came up here, get the fuck out. And you could say that for Flint and other places too. But it seems to me like the black population that came up and, built Detroit, the same as white people did in those factories, maybe even more, you could tell me. Essentially, the white people, and by white people, I'm talking about the oligarchy. So from the national to the local to the state, the business is basically one and the same with the government. all of this gentrification is like a foreign term to a lot of people. It just means get the stomp on the poor and get them the fuck out. Am I missing something here?
Yeah, and I'm gonna let we call it the great migration from the south to the north in the black community, where my grandmother came here in 1950 from Mobile, Alabama. And so just like they came here seeking a new life, and they did build Detroit. Like, yes, it was a Caucasian class here, but if we talk about the automobile, you can read research Ford Motor Company. They literally went to the south to lure black people to the automobile factories to build up the assembly lines and stuff like that, to push out those cars. So Detroit was really built on the backs of the
I just want to add, Ford just laid off 1,000 people.
Yeah. So if you look at the history of these automobile companies and all this, all these factory jobs, and not, Detroit Axle, that was another big company. They made all the axles throughout the whole entire world. So the underclass that from the south that was escaped in basically segregation, black code, Jim Crow. Like, my grandma told me horror stories about the south. They came up here. They helped build up Detroit. I guess the Caucasian people didn't like them and didn't want to live around them as they progressed and, wanted what you call the American dream. And then when Michigan became, unsegregated schools and stuff like that, my mother was one of the first, black women, black class to integrate Cody High School. So all this stuff, with all the stuff that was happening in Detroit, it was always racial tension. It was always racial tension the whole entire time. So after 50 years, it's like a climax. So, it's like, you so-called black people had this city for 50 years and look at it. But they don't talk about the profit sharing revenue that we didn't have for 50 years. They don't talk about how they've been robbing. The state have been literally creating policy to extract wealth from the citizens of Detroit. And I just looked at the mayor budget. And I looked at what generate money in the city of Detroit, and it's the property taxes. So the city of Detroit is built upon the property taxes, and majority of the people that own property is black people. So they are paying their taxes. They are paying their way. Is that their money being mismanaged by corrupt individuals that we put in office, and this to justify some of the stuff with our voters, because I love the people. We have a corrupt election department too. Okay, so we don't know, because if you can recall back in 2016, Detroit, over 70% of the city basically vote was suppressed. And we couldn't even count for 70 people who came out to vote in 2016 because none of the votes can be recounted. Jill Stein came here and everything trying to do the recount and stuff like that. And they discovered that, our voting system here is also corrupt. We didn't have the same city clerk for 16 years. That's another problem. We have the same people in these positions for 16 years or more, and they've been doing the same corruption for so long. And so it's hard to get rid of them because they in these positions and they controlling the votes, they controlling the resources, they controlling the purse strings of the city of Detroit. And everybody that speak up, they'll tell us, well, won't you, try speaking a different way or practice what they call facility, what's that called? Be more cello, and
they want us to be more
docile, more docile.
They want us to have more. It's a whole bunch of racist terms.
Yes. We get called we get called so many names. I can't even keep up with all the names we get called for simply telling the truth. It's like, and then we had a paperwork right in front of them, and they just be sitting there like, well, it's not what you think. It's not what you think. So it's just so ridiculous how we get, so much crap for just telling the truth and demanding that the taxpayers get proper representation.
I wanted to say something. I want to go back and touch on the mayor and the demolition for a minute. But I want to first touch on the migration, because that's a very important part of our history. During the migration, Detroit was one of the first cities that our people migrated to, and it was one of the cities with the largest population. Currently, every city during the 3 migrations that happened, whether it was 3 of them over the last 100 years, during the 3 migration, this is the last city that's been gentrified out of every other city. They done went through Oakland, Harlem, Cleveland, Jersey, Louisiana, Atlanta, Georgia, Washington, D.C., all these predominantly black cities is already done. Right now, we are in the midst of the last black city. Now, when you talk about them demolition projects, you talk about the mayor, you spoke about Kwame Kilpatrick. This current mayor has done the exact thing or worse than him. I'm talking about hands down. Bid rigging. When they call him on giving contracts to 3 companies, and when me and a sister just did a video on one of the companies that was the largest recipients of the hardest hit fund, which is Homage. They received $50 million totally, and that's a demolition company out of another county, all white demolition company they received the butt of the demolition project, but they called them on overcharging them on the demolition houses. They was charging them 5 to 10 times more than the median price. Median price $9,000. They up to $50,000 for houses right now, and the median price in the Midwest is $9,000. Okay, so these companies. Not only that, the federal government sent down invoices saying all the demolition companies have overcharged us for these. And you know what the city of Detroit did? They turned right around, paid it out the taxpayers' money, did not go after none of the companies, no corporate counsel to go after none of the companies to return the money, and turned around and did business with them. So it lets you know that if you rip me off and I pay you back and I pay out my money and don't go after the money and then do business with you, I was a part of that ripoff with you. I gotta be. That's why I paid it off. And this the mayor. Not only that, all the federal probes, he admitted on record, yes, I violated the law. Yes, I did not go through the proper ramifications of those bids. But I got a reason why I didn't violate the law. I have a justification, and his justification didn't make logical sense to reasonable people because he waited until a month before the funds was not going to be available, violated the law and say we had to violate the law because we out of time. If we wouldn't have violated the law, we would have missed out on the funds when he could have did. So this is going on with him on numerous levels. But what he got that Kwame didn't got, he have the paper on his side that would not report, and they turned the churches against Kwame first. And he has a stronghold on the churches by him giving what they call community benefits to them. He gives property to all the churches in Detroit. He gives property to them. They set up, most of the pastors have set up limited liability companies where they got property in these limited liability companies. And they use it, and that's how they using them in order to get voters. The churches got the largest portion of voters, so the mayor know we cannot give them money. So what we can do, set up an ordinance around giving people property. And so they become recipients of prime property, and they be in favor of them, and they be able to sway the church population in order to vote for them.
Yeah, so so the church is like, he got over 100 pastors, the mayor got over 100 pastors to endorse him. And these pastors in Detroit, we're talking about people like Wayne T. Jackson that's worth like $20 million. I mean, church is big business here. We're talking about mega churches here. We're talking about people who got $20 million something dollars. They're living not even in the city of Detroit, but they still have their business inside in the city of Detroit. And even we found out some of their congregation don't even live in the city of Detroit. They drive in the city of Detroit. They use the city of Detroit, and they got so much influence where they can actually, determine who gets elected in a city that they don't even live in, that they don't even pay taxes in. And a lot of the churches, they don't pay taxes on them churches, so they just making straight money from the city, taking it out wherever they are. And then Lord forbid, in the black community, you say anything about the pastors. I got a lot of heat. I had ran for, Yeah, I got a lot of heat. I ran for city council.
Yeah, that's right.
I ran for city council in 2017, and I had did a church protest. And man, oh man, I was the talk of the town because I tried to hold these pastors accountable. And with my previous organization, and when I went out there to stop them, to stop the pastors and reason with them, like, look, how can y'all sit here and support and endorse a man that's under a federal investigation that's doing this to our community? And they laughed in my face. So that goes back into the classism I'm talking about. And so where you would think the churches be the safe place for us to go to and organize and try to get people to be aware, they working against us too. We don't have nobody helping us outside of the 3, 4, 5, or 6 small group of grassroots activists trying to do this big task, taking on this big giant, and all we got is a slingshot, which is our voice. And and I still believe in the power of the people. The people is the power, and we gotta have hope, because if we don't have hope, we might as well dig our own grave and just jump in it, because you gotta fight. You got to fight. So we're going to continue to fight. And I hope that people understand that we are resilient and we're not going to give up. But we want some national attention to this crisis that we are in. And the city of Detroit should not go out like this, because we are a great city and we offer so much. We sacrifice so much to the world. And for us to be treated like this, it breaks my heart. And I don't even want to.
This is what we go through. I mean, if it ain't her crying, it's me crying. If it ain't all of us and feeling a certain way, this is what Detroiters feel: stress, PTSD. We've had clients die. I'm sorry, my clients. They've died off of stress. Dealing with water issues and everything else. What I would just want to say, just strictly to the wrap up of everything you just heard, is like, Detroit is literally under siege. We have literally nobody in our corner fighting for us. We're tired. We are tired. We've done the work of, it's like David versus Goliath in this city, and
Sounds like 3 Goliaths.
well, we it's a very horrible. I've never ever in all my life living here, when people talk about the Great Migration, all I could talk about is me being a Detroit kid of the 90s and what I saw when I was a little boy. Woodward Avenue was not even developed. You had people downtown, but it wasn't popping like it was right now. It was pretty desolate, to the point where, everything was shut down by 5 o'clock. And even after that, there was nothing going on, unless if there was a sporting event that happened here. When I was a kid in Detroit in the 90s, around Coleman Alexander Young, that was a maverick of this city, because he kept the public trust. He kept the public rule within the people, and the people had made their own destinies. We have this city. We still do. But when it's being usurped and taken over, and literally we're being sold out by the tune of pieces of silver by those that need to be, I don't know what they do in medieval times. If you're being caught, selling out the town or whatever, there has to be some public punishment or something. But something has cut the head off, or the head, or something like that, somewhere in that nature. But Detroit citizens deserve justice. We deserve better. I know, me living as a resident here in the city of Detroit, yes, I thought about moving out a few times. But if I make it here in Detroit, I can make it anywhere. But I would rather live and die in Detroit, because Detroit is all I know. Detroit is my heart. I will never give up or leave this city under any circumstance. You can't run me out. You can't run us out. You can't take us out. They're going to have to kill me before I give up anything of my power here in the city of Detroit as a resident here.
I just want to ask you guys, before we close, obviously the numbers are the numbers. Worst poverty in America. Frankly, do you know the game SimCity when you were younger? Yeah. How you could build up a city? But originally in that game, there's nothing there. It's empty land, and you build it as you want. It seems like this was SimCity reversed. Like there was already something here, and they just are building over it. you know? So I want to ask you, because I think everything's interconnected. So this is predominantly, this isn't environmental racism, this is racism, period. But everything is interconnected. So I always tell the audience, listen, it's 100%, the black people have experienced it much worse than the white people, but it's coming for all of us. Yeah. I mean, because honestly, the oligarchy at the end, Martin Luther King got killed once he started talking about jobs and labor and economy. Yeah, so it's really that. So what I'm telling the audience is Detroit might not be you. You might live in a decent neighborhood, but eventually it's coming for you because they want to get rid of poor people and working people. So what can people do? Because people that don't live in Detroit, what, because it seems like there needs to be basically like an immediate call to peaceful arms, not violence, but a call to organizing and arms, because this is beyond a crisis. It's a disaster, what you're describing.
I want to say something real quick, especially pertaining to King. We have the housing crisis, and this is very important. I want to make sure we touch on this. The federal government sends tens of millions to Detroit every year. You know, they probably send 30 million to one department and another 30-some million to another department, strictly here to Detroit. And it's all based on what King did and what King and Whitney Young did. The Fair Housing Act, Civil Rights Act, it's all stemming from that. Now, they blocking out Section 8. The list been closed for years. They would not give no housing to nobody. Everybody has to go out of Detroit in order to get housing. So not only is they attacking us from those angles, now the solution is, and it has to happen right now, it should be thousands of people at the Detroit Housing Commission building, because there's millions of dollars being allotted to them that's not going to them. It should be thousands of people at the municipal building, and it should be massive recalls being done on our city officials. You said something about racism. It is whites, but it's a great black sellout going on as well, and we cannot forget that as well. We got 7 African-American city council members, 1 Hispanic and one white. Okay, so, and then you got 1 mayor. Those are the 10 major positions here, and 7 of them is African Americans. So we're not about to forget that our own people is involved in this heavy, and so we're not gonna take no responsibility out of that. Period. Yeah, I just wanted to stay.
You are super right about it. And I'll be the first and the only one to go. I'll go farther than that. Look, your neighbors are not educated. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, you have those black sellouts, including those that will side with the corporators and the elitists for their own purposes. And yet it looks like, you'll go off the recommendation of a few people that have been paid off. We've had meetings where folk actors have filled the audience, and they have been in major support. And then, this is a problem here. The only solution that I have for people, if they would love to get involved here, I want to make an open call for people to come here and to help us, help us think differently, help us think outside the box, help us think new strategies, because, Joanna and I, we can say that the activist community are tired. We're very tired. We are on so many fronts. All of it is, but we can't get tired, and we haven't give up. Last night we were at the Detroit City Charter Commission meeting. They tried to cancel the meeting. They tried to move it, but people still came out. They showed up. They showed out, and they want to be included. And they are making volunteerism to be in these processions. Now, you have a certain I just made a video the other day called Sabotage Government. And sabotage government means you have a few individuals who are in official positions of power that are taking certain things, and they're either twisting it or they're trying to benefit for their own agenda, and it's not in the agenda worth the people. So you're creating situations, you're creating problems. Okay, it's not the citizenry, it's not us. It's them. If you knew how to lead, if you knew how to govern, if you knew how to act and professionally and with decorum and common sense, stop acting with ineptitude. Stop acting like you stupid. Stop listening to those developers and listen to us, the people, and weigh your decision based on your own common sense. And that's what I make an appeal to. You know, like I said, we're just tired. But we can't give up and we can't give in. I'm pretty sure that some of our activist community here in the city of Detroit, they will welcome you with open arms if you're willing to be an ally and to work with us, not be over us, because we've had people try to come here, try to be white saviors and those, and we can't, you know, for my belief is when the hood stands up, everybody else will. And that's my whole prerogative to what I bring to this table. I have been to discussions. I have been to panels. I have talked solutions with big people to even my neighbors. And I've told everybody, once the community stands up, then everybody else will support and they will follow through. But we have to have clear demands. We have to have a clear agenda, okay? And we have to have research and documentation. We do that on the daily to back it up. The evidence is on our side. We have nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be wrong. And to those distractors, those haters, those people that sit there and say, oh, why are they complaining all that? You shut the hell up. Because you literally have no idea until the fade happens to your community, until it happens to your household. Then you knocking on all of our doors, encouraging us to get involved, and we don't want to. We have to stop that, because one situation is all of our situations. Just like you said, people may not be dealing with this now, but it's already came to Portland, Oregon. It's already came to Camden, New Jersey. I can't believe Cory Booker, presidential candidate, running around the country like he's done, and he's a charterizer. He's a corporate sellout, and he makes Booker T. Washington look like a racist sympathizer. I don't like people. Kamala Harris, presidential candidate, same thing.
But Cory Booker is running for president on the message of love. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Love for whom? Love for whom? The elitist, or I don't know what type of love he got, but I don't want none of it. Who? Oh, well, it could be for the pharmaceutical companies, the charterizers and stuff, but he won't get too far, and neither will those that, look, this presidential election, they already talking about 2020. I'm not involved, because let me tell you something here. Donald Trump is the emergency manager of the country. We did not select him. We did not elect him. I'm serious. When I was in that recount with Jill Stein here in Michigan, the GOP paid so much money to siphon to bury the details, and eventually we will never know if Donald Trump was actually elected, because Michigan, he claimed to won Michigan. Michigan is a battleground state. We make the decisions along with Ohio and Florida. And I can tell you from my heart of hearts that Donald Trump was not elected by the people. He was not. He said Hillary Rodham Clinton got those votes, but even she was oblivious. She wouldn't know what to do, and she would probably endorse and prop up Mike Duggan, Dan Gilbert, and Rick Snyder and others. So we barely have anything. But what I would like to say, and just solutionary and just being positive, is that communities, we have to come together. We have to demand action, but we also have to talk it out. We can't be emotionally reactive. We have to be proactive to the solutions and the in the layout of how we're going to get our communities back. They're not going to give up easily. I mean, they'll keep throwing money at the problem. They'll keep putting people in place that is circumventing the will of the people. But you look at Joanna Underwood. She got 60,000 votes from people who believed in her. No money, knocked on everyone, did it the old-fashioned way. And we see people that have just got recently elected. Rashida Tlaib, she just got recently elected to U.S. Congresswoman over a man that held this community for 50 years. You don't just, John Dingell just passed away. You don't get to be in a position for 50 years and you weren't doing anything, right? Huh? If they ain't want you up there. So when she said all these ideas, but I agree with her to impeach that motherfucker, Trump. Impeach him now,
because he's causing destruction. This government shutdown that just happened has destroyed our country and things in it for years to come. The damage is already done, and I know one major thing. This is the art of war. I'm not going down without a fight. I ain't no punk. We ain't no punks, and we're not finna get punked out by those who believe that their money speaks volumes over our voices. We the people, I believe in that. We the people will overcome, but we will also overthrow. And I said that in Washington, D.C. back in last year when I got up in front of the C-SPAN cameras and I told the whole country, we can't be like this, going after each other. That's what they want us to do. They want us to be distracted. And if we're tearing each other apart, that's not going to help. That we're accomplishing their agenda. It's time for us to all stop what we're doing, breathe, come together, do whatever it is we have to do, and then show up one army, one force, one faith. And once we do that, they're gonna cower. I mean, the walls of Jericho will break around here. I'm not building any walls. I'm breaking them. And Joanna and Ramon, other organizers and people that have dedicated their lives, their time, their sacrifice, their families to protect this city should be recognized and should be applauded. But we also applaud those out in other communities that are fighting corporate terrorism. I mean, it's very important to give recognitions to those that have been in the game, have been in the fight for, and that could teach us a thing or two of how to win in our epicenter where we're at right now.
I would just like to say is that, I appreciate this opportunity to have this interview with you and to show the city that I love, born and raised in, Detroit. I'm a diehard Detroiter. And I also want to bring to awareness to your audience is that they made big business out of keeping people poor. The nonprofit industries, it's big money now. So they will create disaster situations just so for us to so they can get money from the federal government. Look what Flint. All that was man-made. That was not a natural disaster. So they actually creating poverty in the city of Detroit. They creating these situations for us to live in poverty so they can get money. It's a big money thing. And like you said, it's not just Detroit. It's not just black people. It's everybody going to be affected by this eventually. This is going to be a virus that's spread and affect the whole entire world if we don't get a control of it. But it's easy to, disenfranchise and beat down the most weakest person, the most weakest people. And right now, the African Americans, we're strength in spirit, but our condition, our history here has made us vulnerable for these attacks throughout the year. So it's easy to do this with African Americans and other so-called communities of color, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, it will affect you because guess what? It's only 1% rich people that really control the revenue and the wealth of this country. All right. So we live in a capitalist society that says that if you're not from the in crowd, you don't get the opportunities like everybody else, regardless of what your color is. So you might think that you're safe in your little comfortable suburb, but one day they're going to come to you, okay? And the way they set up these urban cities, they suck all the money from the urban cities, sectors, and they put it into the suburbs. But guess what? When there's no money to suck up, then what? How you going to survive? Okay? So what I like to say is that the solution is to believe. Solution is to have hope. The solution is to never give up to fight. The solution is to always trust and believe. And don't let them beat down your self-esteem. Don't let them beat down your confidence. They have beat down people's self-esteem in this country so bad where we feel like we don't worth nothing unless we got $1 million in our bank account. So we got to understand our true value as far as ourselves, and we got to uplift humanity. You got to go out here and vote. And you also got to educate yourself on who you voting for and take your family and friends to the voting polls. And also try to do fundraisers. Start your own political PACs. Start trying to, donate money. Like for me, I had $500 and I went up against $600,000. But if I would have listened to everybody that told me I would never make it, I knocked 100,000 doors, okay, for 6 months on my feet, knocking doors because I wanted to be on this charter commission, because I wanted to be there to try to fight for my city. And so if I can do it as a single mother, I know you can do it too. And you got to believe that you can. And I know that we can. We're going to win. Detroit, we known for fighting. And we're going to fight this, and we're going to win. And we're going to win because we fighting a righteous battle here. We fighting a battle between good and evil. And what they're doing against us is evil, and that's why they're not going to prevail.
I want to end by going on my little, my little, it's not going to be a rant, but so I think what's important for all of you to understand is, as a journalist, if you actually want to be a journalist and not just put on makeup and pretend to be one, the only way, to tell you the truth, I knew Detroit was a crisis. I didn't know it was this bad until I had this conversation. The only way you could find out truth is when you go to the people. The people suffering, by and large, are not in New York and Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles and San Francisco and the coasts. Not trying to knock you if you live on the coasts, okay? But I could tell you when I'm home in New York for too long because I don't have the funding or we don't have the funding to go out there, you get a little disconnected from reality. You get a little disconnected from, you're talking about, this is like the mafia here. Yeah. Maybe even worse. Maybe even worse than any mafia movie I've ever seen. But the reason CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and all these places don't come out here, it's not because they certainly have the money. It's because they are living in their bubble, and that's where they want to stay. They don't give a fuck about these people. They don't. I can tell you why. Because there's people on CNN and MSNBC and in the papers of the New York Times that I have seen at cocktail parties that I am disgraced to have gone to years ago. And I see them on TV snickering about their vacations. Just as much as diversity in government is a problem, where you don't have people from Detroit governing Detroit, and you don't have people that are the people like them actually in powerful positions, the media is completely disconnected. Why do you think they were so shocked when a phony orange orangutan used car salesman hoodwinked America? And they never thought it could happen. So my point to you, I am not here, and Ty's not here to sit here and be a robot and play neutral. No, I'm not neutral to this injustice. So how do we do it? I don't have any fancy investors. None. I had one offer from a really, really wealthy man to fund this whole fucking thing. And I ain't gonna lie, I thought about it for 2 minutes, and then I politely told him to go fuck off. Because I can't have any credibility being funded by this person. I don't hate him, but he's not in line with my values. So the point is, we are building this from the ground up. And I'm not asking you to go fund me so I could go have a lavish dinner. I'll show you the books. We're not. I'm asking you to go fund us. I'm asking you, if you are not a Status Quo member yet, statusquo.com/join. You could do it as low as $5 a month. There's different plans. This is how we fund real journalism. This is how, by the way, I don't want to go into details, but I had a meeting, Ty and I had a meeting earlier today with a very, very high-level official in the state of Michigan. I don't want to say who, but one of the top officials in the state of Michigan. You want to know why I got that meeting? Because I went to Flint 13 times. And I built up enough sources in Flint to break a pretty big story. And that story was largely ignored by the corporate media, but I've kept on it. And I knew the Republican-led governor and the Republican attorney general and that whole Snyder evil mafia family over there. They weren't going to do anything, so I stuck at it. And now, based on continually going back, we're closer to possibly having action and justice. But you can't come to Detroit once if you're a journalist. You can't come to Flint once. You can't come to Cleveland once. You can't come to Milwaukee once, and all these places. The bottom line is, for now, because I'm still trying to get funding from outlets that are more in line with our values, namely those that don't fund Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and the whole big conglomerate. I love corporate terrorists, whoever said that. So right now, you are our investors. So if you got an extra $20 this month, GoFundMe. If you got $5 a month, become a member. You can become a member as low as $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, or $147 annually. I spend, stupidly, $5 probably a day on coffee. Okay? So if I were reverse, I might reconsider that and brew my own coffee. Because citizen journalism, what you're talking about, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And if I'm not your flavor, if status quo's not your flavor, and you think others are better, then fund them. If you are struggling for money and you're living paycheck to paycheck, keep your money. We don't want to make your situation worse. But you got to think about your budget. Citizen journalism is important because part of the reason this suffering goes on is because there is no journalists. The journalists are in bed with the government. So I ask you, we're out here. I don't know about Ty. I literally have not put anything in my mouth today to eat, and it's 8:30. I have not eaten yet because I was preparing for this meeting, and then we drove to this meeting, and then we came here. So the bottom line is, I ain't asking for your sympathy. This isn't charity. Become a member, and for now, GoFundMe, because I'd like to come back to Detroit. And frankly, for what needs to be done, we need to put in our budget some security because we might be targets. So I thank you for watching. I'll definitely keep in touch with you guys.
Yes.
Hydrate Detroit.
Yes.
Where could people find you online?
Joanna Underwood. You can get me on Facebook, and I'm also commissioner. I'm actually an elected official, believe it or not, of the Detroit Charter Commission.
People can find me on Facebook. People can find me on Facebook as well, Miko Williams, and they can also, support Hydrate Detroit because we deliver water and help restore water. If you ever wanted to be in the comeback of Detroit, you would invest within the people, and there's a direct link for that, and I'm pretty sure Detroiters will thank you.
You can find me on Facebook probably and YouTube, AFSC, that's Advocates Fighting Social Change.
And when we cut up these videos, I'll put all that in the description. Thank you for watching. We're on our way tomorrow to, where the hell are we going tomorrow? Lordstown, Ohio. Another factory that General Motors is closing. I don't know if Rachel Maddow's talking about that tonight, huh? General Motors, after all this money, General Motors basically, what can you call it? They're stealing from their workers. The workers are producing all of this profit, and then they throw them out like yesterday's news. So Lordstown, Ohio is one of the 5 plants being closed down, so we're going to go there, try to talk to some auto workers, and then we're going to go to Cleveland. I don't know if you know this. Cleveland has a lead crisis itself. It's everywhere. It's water, lead, you name it, it's everywhere. The national media is a disgrace. Gentrification. Cleveland has, I believe, the worst childhood poverty in the country, at least last year.
The guy who operating here,
Oh yeah, Dan Gilbert, who owns the Cavaliers.
MAGA.
Yeah, who's a Trump supporter. He puts out a lot of good PR because he does have a special needs child, which that's all well and good, but he's a pariah other than that. So we're going to Ohio next. Who knows where after. Thank you for watching. I'm not beyond begging the audience. I'll beg you. I'm not going to beg any powerful plutocrats. Fund us. Love us. Share this video. Peace.